Hello everyone, welcome back to ParsecGames and welcome back to episode 2 of our Five Nights at Freddy's 2 tutorial series. In this episode I'm going to show you how to do the newspaper animation, followed by the office, including the flashlight and all that kind of stuff. But before we get into that, I actually want to plug a video that I did a while ago, which is about a game that I'm working on. It's called Zombie Zone. Right now you're seeing some footage of it on the screen. I've been working on this game for over a year now. I'm the only developer on it. I think it's a pretty cool concept and it's really fun to play. So if you want to see how far I've gotten so far, or at least how far I was a couple months ago, you can actually check out that video. The link is down below. I'd really appreciate it if you give it a look, because I think it's going to be a really cool game and I'm really pushing Scratch to its limits with this game. So I'd really like to show you what I'm doing there. Now, without further ado, I only have one more thing to say, which is that if you want to keep seeing these kind of videos, especially following this tutorial series, make sure to like and subscribe and ring the bell. That way you'll get notifications whenever I upload a new video and whenever I continue this tutorial series. So let's see how far we'd gotten last time. So we had the main menu right here. Looks really cool already, but I think the new game button and continue buttons didn't have any function yet. At least nothing happens when you press them. So let's have a look. We had coded them in such a way that they send out mainMenu.newGame or mainMenu.continue when they're pressed, but nothing receives these, so that nothing happens. So what's supposed to happen now if you press new game is that the newspaper is supposed to come up, the newspaper clipping telling you that you can work at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new sprite. And now what we're going to do is we're going to import the correct costume and import it in HD. In case you do not have this HD button right here, that means you're not using Scratch plugins, which I really recommend. I already talked about it in the last video. This is going to make your life so much easier if you just install this plugin either in Firefox or Google Chrome or whatever you're using. It's a really cool plugin. I'll make a video about it someday. Just start using it. I really recommend it. Let's keep going. So if we choose HD upload, we can actually upload in high definition, make it look good. So the newspaper sprite should be in Nights and Custom Night, Paycheck and Fire, and then 272, that's it. And now of course, first thing we're going to do is just center it and set the size to 50, because the size of this image is actually exactly the double of the size of the Scratch preview window. So if we set it to 45, for example, you can see that's a little bit too small. 48 already starts fitting, but let's set it to 50 just to make sure that whatever, that covers the whole screen. 48 will be enough, but I'll just set it to 50. So when the flag is clicked, this should happen, and it should also hide, because obviously when you start up the game, this should not be showing the newspaper. By the way, we're going to call the script newspaper, call the sprite newspaper. And now what we're going to do is when this receives mainMenu.newGame, it's going to set the ghost effect to 50 and show, meaning it's not actually visible yet. It's shown, but it's still transparent. And then what we're going to do, we want to have it fade in slowly. So we're going to repeat 50 times, go to front layer, that's important, and change ghost effect by -2. Let's check out what that looks like. Yeah, so you can see it slowly fades in, but then as soon as it's gone, as it's done with that, it's no longer going to the front layer, so the static and the text fields right here go in front of it. So what we need to do is we need to actually tell the main menu to stop doing what it's doing as soon as the newspaper is finished fading in. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the status to newspaper as soon as we receive this. So let's press new game. And as you can see, you can no longer press the buttons or anything. And now this stays like this. The newspaper stays in the front. Now if we hide it, we can see that the other stuff, the main menu stuff, is still there. It's just not doing anything anymore, but it's still there. So what we need to do is, as soon as this is done, we need to broadcast a new broadcast called mainMenu.hide. That's what I'm going to call it. And now we need to go into each of these sprites and just make them hide as soon as they receive this. So when I receive mainMenu.hide in the sprite which is responsible for the animatronics, I'm going to make it hide. So as you can see, they're already gone. Now we're going to look into this part, which was just the texts. And if you remember, all the buttons and stuff were actually just clones. So when we receive mainMenu.hide, we can actually just delete the clones. Let's try that out. Press new game. And now hide the newspaper. As you can see, they're all gone except for the main title. That's because the main title is actually the sprite itself and not a clone. So we need to add hide in here so that the title also disappears. So we're going to give that one more try. See if it works. Yep. And what we're also going to do is we're going to set static opacity to 100. Because if you check again, you can see the static is actually still doing stuff. If we set it to 100, it just becomes transparent so we don't notice anymore. Just to make sure we have a clean slate that we're working with. And now what we're going to do is that the newspaper should wait maybe 2 or 2.5 seconds. So let's set it 2.5. And we're going to make it fade to black, which we're going to do by changing ghost to brightness in this loop here, so that it fades to black. And also don't forget to set the brightness effect to 0 at the beginning here, just in case, just to make sure that it's not completely black at the start. So let's press new game. Waits for a bit, then fades to black. And now what should happen is that we should send out analog transition to get a new transition, and also send out a new message, which we're going to call display night. And for that, we're going to have to make a new sprite once again and import the night display which shows you which night you're on when the night is about to start. And these don't have to be in HD because they're really pixel art anyways. So these should be in nights and custom nights and then nights. So we'll import all of these. Delete the costume 1 and make sure these are in order. Let's check if they're in order. No. Now they are. Okay. And now what we're going to do, as you can tell, once again, these have like a gray background. We want to get rid of that. We could either remove that with the transparency fill. But what we're actually going to do is we're just going to set the brightness to 0 and just fill it with black. Because this part around here has to be black anyways. So we can just put that into the costume. Just do that quickly for every one of these. Okay, looks good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go through each costume and just rename it so that the number of, or the name of the costume corresponds with the night that it's supposed to display. So first night obviously has to be called 1. Second one is going to be called 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And now what we're going to do is obviously center it so that it's right in the middle of the screen. And of course, when the flag is clicked, this should also hide once again, because we don't want to see that at the beginning of the game when we start it up. Okay, and when this receives display night, it should show up. Show. And obviously the newspaper also has to disappear when that happens. So we're going to put a hide right here between the analog transition and the display night broadcast. And we're going to rename the sprite to display night, just so we know what it does. And we are going to need a new variable called current night, which is always going to store which night we're on. And it's just going to switch to costume current night, so that if the current night is 1, then it's going to switch to costume 1 and so on. And obviously if we start a new game, that should always set the current night to 1. So right before we broadcast the display night and stuff, we're going to set current night to 1. Because starting a new game should obviously reset the current night to 1. And now you might have noticed that these actually don't have any sounds, these menu buttons, which I actually forgot in the last episode, so we're going to add that quickly. And how we're going to do that is just we're going to look into the analog transition sprite and get the sound which we used for the transition and just add that into the text sprite. And now we're going to look into the part or the clone which is responsible for this little arrow here. And what we're going to do is just make a new variable which is only for this clone or sprite, but in this case just for the clone, which we're going to call last value of hover, which is a very long name. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to check whether main menu hover is not last value of main menu hover. Don't forget the not. Put that around here. And now this doesn't change anything so far of the behavior. It seems pretty much the same. But what we're going to add in here is now that it plays the sound whenever this is the case and sets main menu hover or last value of main menu hover to main menu hover. so that it only plays a sound if we actually change what we're pointing at. And then we can also make it so that clicking either new game or continue also plays that sound. And as you can see, we already have the night display right here, which is going to stay up for maybe 2 seconds or so, and then it's going to broadcast night.start, which is what's going to actually start the night, and also broadcast analog transition once again for this nice effect. And one more thing that we shouldn't forget is that the music should actually stop when this night counter is displayed. And what we're going to do is we're going to add in a stop all sounds right when we're about to broadcast display night, so that the music stops right there. And as you can see in the main menu animatronic sprite, the music actually isn't repeated if we're no longer in the main menu, if the status is not main menu. So that means that this will actually stop the music completely. Yep. So what we're also going to add is setting the status to display night when we receive display night, just so that we can always keep track of what's happening right now. I don't know if we're going to need this later, but we're just going to make sure that we always keep status updated to what's happening on the screen right now. And then when this display night happens, obviously we need to add in a wait here, maybe of 2 seconds or so before we send out the analog transition and the night start. And now what we're going to do is add the office. So we're going to once again make a new sprite. This time upload it in HD again, because we actually want to have these looking good. And these should be in office, nights, and main menu, or menu, and then just the office. And then there's 2 sprites right here, which should, I think, just be the empty office. I don't know why there's 2 of them. We'll have a look at that in a moment. But as you can see, both in the costume tab as well as in the preview stage, you can see that we actually can't see the full picture because it's way too big, because we uploaded it in HD. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the size to around 30 or so, and move it to the middle, or to the center. And obviously, as you can tell, we're not going to keep it this way. It's just so that we can actually see what's going on in these costumes. So these seem to be pretty much the same, except this is the one that occurs when the flashlight's not working. As you can tell by the very small light point over here. So what we're going to call this is flashlight error. And the one with nothing happening is just going to be called standard. Now what we're going to do is we're going to receive night.start, show, set the size to 50, and switch to costume standard and all that. And we're going to make a new variable, which is going to be there for controlling the office x and y, for controlling the office x coordinate. So we're just going to call this office underscore x. And we're going to set office x to 0, just so that the office starts right in the middle at the start of the game. What we're going to do is that when night.start is sent out by display night, we're going to set the status to in-game right in that moment. And we're going to make it so that this office sprite, which we're going to call office, it's going to repeat until the status is no longer in-game. It's going to go to set. It's going to set x to office x. Okay, so in the beginning, we also need to remember to add a when flag is clicked and hide, so that the office doesn't appear right away. And as you can see, we've added a little bug earlier, because we can actually see these arrows right in the beginning in a place where they're not supposed to be. So what we need to do to fix that is just very simple, that we need to add in the part where the clones are created, where they check what their type is, where the type might be select. We're just going to get this part right here, which is set last value of main menu hover to. And we're just going to replace this with a question mark. And you might wonder why a question mark. It doesn't really matter what we put in here. It just shouldn't be 00, 10, or 01, because we want to make sure that at the start of the game, this guy realizes, or the arrow realizes, that it needs to go someplace. So if we set it to question mark, then there's no way that main menu hover is going to equal question mark. So he actually sets last value of main menu hover to the correct value and goes to where it's supposed to go, so that he doesn't appear like this. And now that works already. Now I think what we might add is a fade to black on the night screen as well. I think that's also in the original game. So we're going to add that in here just before we broadcast that analog transition. And we're also going to make this hide just in case, so that it's not floating around somewhere. Yeah, newspaper already hides, so we don't need to add that anymore. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to replace the Office X in here with 0 minus Office X. This is going to make sense in a moment. And now what we're going to do is we just want to check how far we can push Office X without the costume leaving the stage. Basically what we want to prevent from happening is if I set this value, the maximum slider value, to a very high value, you'll see that at some point it actually leaves the corner of the screen open. So what we're going to do is we're just going to check how far we can push it without showing the black bar on the side. And I think that should be around 120. So now we know that the maximum value for Office X should be 120 and the minimum value should be minus 120. So we can already add that in here. We're going to check whether the absolute value of Office X is greater than 120. And then check if Office X is larger than 0. In that case, we're going to set Office X to 120. And otherwise, we're in the negative direction, so we need to set it to minus 120. So now this is going to prevent us from accidentally slipping over the edge. And we're going to put this in front of the X shift, so that whenever it's going to move through that position, it's already checked whether we're over the boundary and adapted and fixed that, so that we never move too far to the left or to the right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to check whether the absolute mouse position is greater than a certain value, or mouse X position, sorry. And we're going to set that to maybe 65 or so. And in that case, we're going to check whether the mouse is to the right or to the left of the center of the screen. And if it's to the right, we're going to change Office X by mouse X minus 65. Because we need it so that when we're pointing at 65, it's just not moving. And the same goes for if it's lower than 0, except that we need to add 65, because in that case the X coordinate where it starts moving is minus 65. So we need to make up for that using plus 65. So as I can tell, this moves way too fast. It's very responsive, but it moves way too fast. So we need to add a little factor in here, which we're going to find out just by trying it. Maybe 0.3. Yeah, that could work. Add that to the negative part as well, just to test it out. Yeah, I think 0.3 could be a good option. Maybe 0.25 would be even better. Yeah, that feels pretty responsive. So now we have the office moving around. Now what we're going to want to add is making it so we can actually use the flashlight. So what we're going to do to add this is make a new variable called flashlight on. And at the beginning of the night, this is going to be set to 0. And in the original game, the button to press the flashlight is control. In Scratch, we can't access the control key. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to check whether we're pressing let's say spacebar, and if that's the case, we're going to set the flashlight on or to 1, and if it's not the case, we're going to set it to 0. So let's try that out. Whenever we press it, this switches to 1, and now what we need to do is we're going to need to find the costume which has the flashlight on. So let's do another HD upload, look into the hallway folder, and I think this might be, no, 1 to 3 is the empty hallway. And we're going to call this costume standard _1 and call the old standard _0. And the reason we're going to do that is we're going to actually put this switch costume 2 inside the loop and make it switch to join standard _ followed by flashlight on. And let's see. Now if you press space, you can tell that it actually turns on the light, because we set the costume names to standard_0 and standard_1, and that's exactly what this gives us depending on flashlight on being 1 or 0. Okay, now we have the office moving around. We can look around, we can turn on the flashlight. Now one thing that's missing is different objects in the office. One thing is obviously the table. Another thing are the buttons on the sides. So we're going to add these as separate sprites. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new sprite and import the costumes we need for that. So let's look around the office inside, and we're going to have to select these 4 sprites here for the fan turning, rotating. These are going to be the different fan sprites. We're going to call these fan 0. And I don't think we need the one where it's not moving, because as you can tell there's no motion blur here, so this fan isn't moving. So we're going to delete 293, but keep 291, 296 and the other one, which I've already renamed. And let's just call them fan 012. And once again, when the flag is clicked, this should hide. And now we're going to go into the office sprite and send out a broadcast, which we're going to call office tick. And we're going to broadcast this right before the office changes its X position. And wherever the table receives office tick, it's going to also go to the correct X position, which should be 0 minus office X. And we're also going to make it show. And as you can tell, it's way too big, so we need to make it a little bit smaller. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to look into the office sprite and make it so that the office sprite itself actually receives office tick, and in that case changes the X position so that these are always synchronized. And now as you can tell, we can actually get over the edge, which we're not supposed to. And the reason for that is that actually we broadcast the office tick and then change office X, meaning the check up here where the office X has left the borders actually doesn't check in time for the changing of the X. But to fix that, we can just grab this part here and move it above the check, and that should fix it. Yeah. So now let's go back into the desk sprite, and we're just going to check out different sizes to see which one looks correct. Maybe 45, and obviously it's floating right now, so we need to move it downwards a little bit to minus 100 maybe, minus 80, minus 90. And I think 50 might be better as a size. And we're also going to make it change to the next costume at all times. And we're going to move it a little bit lower to maybe minus 110. Yeah, so now we have the desk working. I'm going to call this office_desk. And we're also going to make a new sprite for the buttons which are supposed to appear. HD upload once again, and we're going to have to start looking for the buttons on the sides, which are in Office, Nights and Menu, and then Office Utilities. They're the numbers 90, 91, 93, 98. Import these, and then I'm going to call these ones left 0, left 1, depending on whether the button is clicked or not, and right 1 and right 0. Okay, now what we're going to do is going to make it so that when the flag is clicked, these are going to hide. And now what we're going to do is we're going to make a new variable just for this sprite called myType. And once again, we're going to be using clones. That's why I'm using myType. When the flag is clicked, we hide the sprite and set the type to main. And when we receive night.start, we're going to check whether myType equals main. In that case, we're going to make another variable called, which is also going to be for this sprite only, which is going to be called direction. And we're going to set direction to left, create a clone, and then set it to right, and once again create a clone. And then when they start as a clone, they should set their type to clone. And yeah, and we're going to do it so that when night start is received by a clone, we should actually delete this clone, because if we forget deleting these clones at some point, they should at the latest be deleted at this point. Otherwise, we're going to have more and more buttons coming up as you start each night, which is going to be pretty bad. So yeah, and now what we're going to do is we're going to once again check for office tick, and then depending on whether the direction is left or right, meaning it's the left or the right button, we're going to set the X position according to that. So we're going to check whether direction equals left. In that case, we're going to go to, we're going to set the Y position at the top and then set the X position within the if clause. And we're going to set it to 0 minus office X. And we're going to have to add a certain value to that. And otherwise, we're going to set it to 0 minus X and going to have to add a certain value to that. Now, to get the clones, we actually need to do the whole night start thing. So we're going to restart the game. Press new game. And that way we should go to the office in a moment and get the buttons there. Also make sure to add in show in here, but only if the type equals clone. Actually put the whole thing into that clause. Now as you can see, these buttons are moving around. Okay, so they spawned now, but they're not moving correctly. They're just moving with the office. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make a new variable called vent light underscore left and vent light underscore right. And these are always going to switch to their direction joined by an underscore and another join with vent light left if it's the left vent light, and vent light right if it's the right vent light. It's difficult to say. Okay, so now let's move these around as they're supposed to be moved around. So as you can tell, we need to move the left light by a negative number to push it to the left. So maybe minus 300 or so, yeah. And also we need to set the size of these to around 60 to make them still easily pressable. And then the right button has to obviously go to plus 300. And now as you can tell, these are already looking pretty good. We can set the Y value to maybe a little bit lower to push them right above the vent. Hide all these variables here, which are kind of annoying at the moment. But you might just be able to tell that we're actually pushing these around with the edge of the stage whenever we go past them. You might just be able to see that a little bit right here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to check whether the absolute value of the X value is smaller than a certain amount, or the X position is smaller than a certain amount. If that's the case, they're going to show, and else they're going to hide. So as you can see now, they're not showing at all because this is very small. 50 is very small. Let's set it to 250 maybe. Now they're going to start disappearing too early probably. Nope. They're going to set it to 150. No. 200. Yeah. No, that's too early. So 220 maybe. Nope, still too early. Let's set it to 240. That's still a little bit early, maybe 245. Still a little bit early. I think 250 was actually a pretty good guess. Yeah, so 250 is actually right on the sweet spot. So now you can see they're not being pushed around anymore, because as soon as they would start being pushed around, they just hide themselves. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make it so you can actually press the buttons. And we're not going to do this in the office tick broadcast, because that's only going to be for making them show up or move around. Instead, we're going to make it in the when I start as a clone. Make it repeat until the status is not in game, meaning the round is finished. Meaning this is only going to be checking whether you're pressing the buttons if you're actually in the game. Going to check whether the mouse is being pressed and the mouse pointer is being touched. In that case, we're going to wait until the mouse is no longer being pressed to make sure that you only press it once, and then after you release it, it actually does something. And then just to be sure, we're going to check again if you're actually still touching it with the mouse pointer, because otherwise it could happen that you're clicking it and you didn't actually want to click it, so you move away, and then releasing the mouse would still make it fire. So what we're going to do is just do it like this, and then check whether it's the left or the right button. And if it's the left one, we're going to set vent light left to 1 minus vent light left. And if it's the right one, obviously we're going to set vent light right to 1 minus vent light right. Now you might be wondering, what is this 1 minus vent light whatever? What's that supposed to be? Well, it's actually pretty clever. If the vent light is off right now, meaning it's 0, this gives us 1, meaning it's going to be turned on. And if this is already 1, it gives us 0. So this actually just toggles between 1 and 0 depending on if it's 1 or 0 so far. So we can try that out by restarting the game so that this script is actually loaded into the clones. And we're also going to make it so that at the beginning of the round, both vent light left and right are set to 0 by the main sprite. And now, as you can tell, we can already click these. Works like a charm. Now what we're also going to do is, you shouldn't be able to have both vent lights on at the same time. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to check if vent light left equals 1 and vent light right equals 1. In that case, we're going to turn off the right vent light because we pressed to turn on the left vent light. And the same thing goes for down here, except of course we're going to turn off the left one if we're pressing the right one. So let's check that out. Right now the right one is on, and now if we're going to press the left one, that should turn off the right one. Yes, it did. Works like a charm. Let's try it out in full screen. And as you can see, all the textures are actually really in HD, which looks great. So yeah, I think the desk is actually not at the right position. I don't remember what it actually looks like in the original game. I think it has to go a little bit to the right actually. Like this maybe? Not sure. Maybe you can comment down below if there's something wrong with the coordinates. I think minus 115 could be round right, could be correct. And as you can see, the flashlight still works, the vents work, except that the vents actually don't work. So as you can tell, we can press the buttons, but they don't actually light up anything. So what we're going to have to do here is go into the office and just import for now the images with nothing in the vents. I'm going to call these standard right for when the right vent is on, and standard left when the left vent is on. I might have these might be switched up right now. I can't really see the vents. Just gonna have to check on that in a moment. But now what we're gonna do is we're gonna make it so that if flashlight on equals 1, this is still gonna be the case. Otherwise, we're gonna check whether vent light left equals 1. In that case, we're gonna switch to costume standard left. Yeah. Otherwise, we're gonna check whether vent light right is on. Switch to standard right in that case, and otherwise we're going to switch to standard 0. So as you can tell, we can still press the space to turn on the flashlight, but we can also turn on the vents. And this also has the effect that if the vent lights are on, we can still use the flashlight. It'll just turn off the vent light over here. So that works wonderfully. And that's the office so far. So we have all the buttons working, all the lights working, flashlight and everything. The office moves around nicely. That works so far. I'm just going to rename the button sprites to buttons. And that's the office so far. If I forgot anything, please let me know. I'll add that in the next video. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you'll keep following this tutorial series, and maybe like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I think this is going to be a pretty chill tutorial series. It's going to be pretty easy doing this, because it's pretty much the same as the first game, just a little bit more complex, but not that much. And the first one is pretty doable, so this should be very easy to do as well. But as I said, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll be glad to see you in the next one. And until then, bye.